I am holding 2,113-year-old Roman propaganda in my hand, and it commemorates a mass gang rape. But somehow this isn't the most interesting part of it, because it also celebrates a foreign king, Titus Tatius, who was an existential enemy to Rome. Why would the Roman Republic commemorate such a hideous event and also a foreign king? Well, the legend goes on 21 April 753 BC, Romulus unalives his twin brother Remus and founds a settlement on the Palatine Hill called, well, Rome. Although he did have some followers, it became very clear that he would need to attract new settlers to ensure the survival of this new settlement. But who on earth would want to abandon their homes, their families, their lives, and risk it all at a fledgling new settlement with no infrastructure, no army, and not even legitimacy? Well, Romulus devised a clever plan to open up citizenship to criminals, the slaves, the poor, the disgraced, the disenfranchised people from surrounding Latium. Today we might call them economic migrants, and as with today, there's a big problem with them. Pretty much all of them were men. I admit there was a big upside. They were mostly military age, so forming the first legions wasn't much of a problem, but thinking longer term, it would be difficult for Rome to survive beyond a generation without any women. But what women would want to come to Rome? A wild western town pretty much, full of despicable criminals, escaped slaves, and marry them? Well, the answer was nobody, so Romulus decided to hold this great festival honoring Neptune. It was going to be the greatest party of all of Latium. Everyone across the region would want to join the festivities. Even the princess from the most powerful kingdom in the land, Hersilia from Sabina, would come. Everything was going great. Everyone was drinking, feasting, celebrating, but then Romulus gave the signal, and suddenly the Romans abducted all the young women and chased everyone else away. Roman historian Livy says 30 women were abducted and that day, all of them virgins except for Hersilia. Naturally, this completely shifted the geopolitical landscape of Latium. Previously, Rome was perhaps seen as some kind of a rogue state, which was a bit of a nuisance but nothing more. But now they resembled something approaching a terrorist state, and thus the neighboring towns launched an immediate attack on Rome to save their daughters. It was repelled. They tried again and again, but it was repelled time and time again. But then the superpower of the land, the Sabines, arrived, led by the legendary king Titus Tatius, who's this guy, arrived. The various accounts of the myth differ here, but essentially the Vestal Virgin Tarpeia betrays Rome, opens up the citadel to the Sabines, which is essentially like a defensive internal castle, and with the defensive advantage, the Sabines prepared for battle the very next day. And thus one of the most important battles in world history would take place. On one side you had Romulus, who's fighting for the survival of his fledgling settlement, and on the other you had Tatius, who's fighting to rescue the daughters from his kingdom and hopefully defeat the Roman terrorists once and for all. The Battle of Lacus Curtius then started. The battle went back and forth for a while, but then according to Livy, the Romans gained the upper hand. But then the abducted Sabine women, led by Hersilia, flung themselves into the middle of the two armies and stopped the bloodshed. According to Plutarch, these women would also bring food and care for the wounded, and they even introduced their Sabine fathers to their new Roman husbands. And then a peace treaty was signed. The two kingdoms would be united under the dual kingship of Romulus and Titus Tatius, and also administered by the Roman Senate. And essentially the Sabines, the women and also the men, were assimilated into Rome. This foundational myth demonstrates how the defeated foreigners can be united and assimilated into Rome. It also establishes how the women of the defeated nations can be assimilated through marriage and the men through subjugation of arms. And this is why in 89 BC, which was 700-ish years after this event, when Rome had just won the war against the Italians, also known as the Social War, the War of the Allies, a war where the Italians Italian city-states, the allies of Rome revolted and declared war on Rome after being refused Roman citizenship time and time again. After Rome won the war, they would relent and give citizenship to the Italians. One of the reasons, by the way, Rome didn't give them citizenship in the first place was Rome was a sort of democracy, and the Roman citizens, like anyone, were quite xenophobic against foreigners, and they didn't want foreigners to have the rights and perks and voting power that they had. And to help convince them that bringing the Italians into the Roman fold was a force for good, this coin with Titus Tatius on one side and the goddess Victoria or Victory on the other side reminds the Roman people that Rome's foundational strength comes from its ability to fully assimilate the defeated. If the Sabines could become Romans, then the Italians could become Romans as well. Thanks for listening.